Hello, everyone. Welcome to CSA Talks. This time, my guest is an adventurous person, Cathy O'Dowd. Welcome, Cathy, to CSA Talks, first of all.
Lovely to be with you.
Thank you so much. She is the first woman in the world who climbed the highest mountain in the world, Mount Everest, from both sides, from both north and south sides. She's a motivational speaker, she's a mountain climber, and she's an author. Cathy, I want to start asking the first question. What motivated you to climb a mountain, first of all, and especially Mount Everest?
It's actually two different things. So the motivation to climb, an opportunity as a teenager to start rock climbing, and then as soon as I got to university, I was off. I joined the rock climbing club, then went expeditioning. I just love the wild, beautiful environments where it happens. I find that stimulating, peaceful, personally enriching. Then I like the nature of the challenge of climbing. People think of it as being very physical, which it is, but there's a big part which is mental, risk management and problem solving. And I find that really interesting. There's the bond of these small teams that you operate, kind of personal achievement, but only possible because you're collaborating together as a group of people. So it's never really been about, conquering summits or something. It's about participating in this process, which is an exploration. It's a journey of discovery, both personally and within this wilderness environment. So then how does that get you to Everest? Because you don't have to climb Everest. There are a lot of mountains in the world. I just wanted to go to the Himalaya, and there weren't a lot of opportunities. I was a young woman operating out of South Africa. It was very difficult. And suddenly splashed across the national media was the first South African Everest expedition. The team were all men. And then kind of on the side was this frankly rather bizarre, almost reality television style competition to find a girl to add to the team. And then the whole thing was a bit of a media contrivance to get more publicity for the project. And on one hand, I looked at this and thought, oh, this is contrived, it's sexist, it's like blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, it's an opportunity. And sometimes what we want in life, it doesn't come to you exactly the way you hoped. But if you've got an idea of what you're trying to achieve in the longer term, you can look at something and go like, okay, I can work with this. And that's how I felt about the Everest expedition. It wasn't about Everest. I didn't particularly like joining the team that way, but it was an opportunity towards what I genuinely wanted, which was more climbing experience, visit the Himalaya, get onto the really big mountains of the world. And it worked. I got onto the team and I got to the summit, and that changed everything.
It's very exciting, and especially reaching the summit, the peak of the mountain. Probably the view should be amazing from there. I was always imagining when I see the pictures or different videos of mountaineers posting on social media and everywhere. It should have been very exciting to have this feeling to reach the peak of the mountain. And I also think, what happens if you can't reach the peak?
I think that's a really important thing to dig into, because mountain climbing does get used a little too superficially as a metaphor for achievement. Clearly, it's all about standing on top, and if you don't do that, you failed, and somebody who's truly successful will never turn back, they'll never quit, None of that is true to what it's actually like. This is a genuinely risky activity. A whole set of the risks are kind of human generated, as in we make mistakes and we can try and reduce that. But there's also stuff that is entirely bad luck, just completely out of your control. These are wilderness environments. So there's always objective risk. So the first thing a good climber knows is we may not get to the top. It may get too dangerous. We must be keeping an eye on when we should back off. And someone who refuses to do that, who says, no, summit or bust, they're dangerous. They're a liability to themselves and to the team. So you've got to be really level-headed. There are two goals: get to the top, come home alive. You know, we want both, but let's try and come home alive if we have to choose. So it's important to step away from calling it failure and realize that there are two goals, short-term, long-term, and let's not blow up the long-term because we got too obsessed with one particular short-term goal. The other thing that's important for me, different people are motivated by different things, and some people are very goal-orientated, and that's fine. If that's who you are, you should work to that. But we aren't all like that. I'm not. And I think those of us who are kind of process-orientated can feel a little left out in a very goal-achieving society. I'm there for the journey. I mean, the summit's great, but you're there for 10 minutes. That's not long if you put in weeks or months of work. You get the view most of the way up. You know, it isn't unveiled just because you stepped onto one particular square meter of mountainside. I'm there for the interest and the challenge of the journey. And sometimes we might fail to reach the top, but if something has gone badly wrong, we recognize that, we execute a planned retreat strategy, we manage to make it work, we get everybody down safely. That's really quite interesting. And it's very good for building confidence for the future, to know that in a really difficult situation, you can still think sensibly, you can execute your strategies, you can retreat in good order. Knowing that about yourself and your team, that gives you more confidence to make the next challenge that much more dramatic, that much more difficult, because you know you can creatively problem solve. So there's a lot to be got out of the process. It's not actually just about the top.
Yeah, the experiencing the journey is more important than the reaching the destination in some cases, right?
It's all about the journey in the end.
And I also listened to one of your interviews on YouTube that your experience about climbing Mount Everest and probably Edmund Hillary's experience of climbing Mount Everest were a bit different from each other. So what was the difference? Where the differences?
Well, what really interests me is this idea that the mountain really hasn't changed in all these decades. It's the same pile of rock and snow. But what it means to us as humans, you know, you take Edmund Hillary, this mountain had never been done before, although people had got quite high. He did have some knowledge to work with. So the sheer audacity of a group of people who go like, this thing that no human being has ever done, we're the team who think we can do it. So then you take it through to when I climbed it, and now we're still climbing kind of traditional national teams. You know, it's not yet with guides, but there are more people on the mountain. There's a lot more information. We've got modern equipment. So in that sense, it's got quite a lot easier because there's so much information from other people who've been before, and there are more people on the mountain. But what I climbed is still very different from now, which 25 years later, where it's turned into a massive commercial operation. And now there are fixed safety lines from base camp to the summit. There are guides making all the decisions for you. There are Sherpas doing all the work for you. You just have to write a big enough check to make this happen. So on one hand, this is quite human. We want these big achievements, but we also want to make it as easy as possible. So we start chipping away at what made it an achievement in the first place, in the interest of trying to make it easier for ourselves. And that's a sort of tricky dynamic because we're watering down. And people, they miss the fact that they're still doing the physicality of it, but all of the subtle stuff, the decision-making, the experience, they've outsourced that to a guide. And it's actually that is the heart of mountaineering, risk management in uncertain circumstances. So in terms of my corporate work, it's interesting because some people still see Everest as a metaphor for achievement. Other people see Everest as a, Disney World in the mountains. And increasingly, I use Everest as a starting point to look at how the world is changing quickly and how companies who really want to achieve need to step out of the queue It may be Everest, but you can't stay in that queue with everybody else. That's not being innovative. You've got to go back to what Edmund Hillary actually did, which was look for something that no one else had ever done and say, us. We've got an idea how to make that thing happen. And I move on to talking about other mountaineering challenges I've done, looking at things where you're trying a route that nobody has ever climbed before, and how much more difficult that is to maintain a team and run a project with the complete uncertainty of being a pioneer. You have no one to follow. And so that's where it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's really inspiring as well. Especially to find out new challenges in your life, to be the first in some areas, not the follower, for some projects, especially for corporate life. I also read that you're working on women empowerment projects in different countries. Can you also take us through that journey a bit? Or a couple of examples?
This is just something I'm involved in on the side. And of which the favorite of the various things I've been involved in is a project called Ruwenzori Women for Health. Now, the Ruwenzori is this chain of mountains between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it's one of the very few places in the world with glaciers on the equator. And it's where I did my very first mountaineering expedition back in 1990, I think. It's a beautiful, wild chain of mountains. And a friend of mine, who's a nurse, started working out there to try and help to bring rural health advice to women in villages that are so remote there are no roads. So if your child is ill, they're going to have to be carried down the mountain on somebody's back to get to what is then a pay-for treatment hospital, private hospitals. And they can't afford it. So they stay in the villages too long and the children die. So this project, which is very grassroots, has been designed just to bring health advice into the villages to help the woman particularly, but everyone understand when to recognize that somebody needs to be brought down, what kind of treatments are really helpful in the initial stages, just to empower women with health information, and then to help with some of the logistics and costs of getting people to hospital in a timely manner. And it's small stuff, but it's small stuff that makes real differences to real lives in a beautiful but very difficult place.
It's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That brings probably to my last question, which is we all became closer to the nature, especially during pandemic, and probably in post-pandemic times, we will want to be close to the nature, and nature is very crucial in our individual lives. So not everybody can climb a mountain or hill. What happens? What's your probably suggestion to someone who doesn't climb a mountain, but who want to be close to the Mother Nature? How can that person, he or she, can align his or her own life with the Mother Nature?
I think we need to do two things. And one is on a personal level, which is not just think of nature as Mount Everest or something huge and dramatic and very far away. Even for those of us like myself who are kind of climbers, like big expeditions, the pandemic, because we couldn't fly, has forced us to realize it doesn't all have to be a Himalayan expedition. And frankly, we should all probably fly less anyway for the environment. There's an enormous amount closer to home. Less dramatic, maybe it doesn't make a headline in the media, but it's still beautiful, it's still challenging, and it's much more accessible. So I've done so much close to home. But coming back to your question, okay, go outside. Even if you live in the middle of a city, go outside and get the sun on your face. Walk in your lunch hour rather than sitting inside. Walk to watch the sunrise in the morning or after work in the evening to relax. We could all do with more exercise, and we could all do with doing it outdoors. Explore your local environment. You may look out of your door and go like, yeah, but this is just a dirty, noisy, polluted street. Somewhere out there's a park, hopefully. Just look around within your city and try and find those hidden gems, the parks, the river banks, the footpaths. There's more out there than people think. And then, take those weekends and try and start looking around the edges of your city. For people for whom walking feels a bit boring, there are a lot of outdoor sports and outdoor activities. Look around. I like a bit more challenge. So ski mountaineering, rock climbing, canyoneering, it all happens outdoors. But then it's also, I think, as individuals, we should be pushing our cities, our governments, our municipalities to do more to create outdoor space in urban environments. Most of us live in urban environments. Let's tell the people we elect that we value outdoor space. It's important for health. It's important for, a good mindset. So it's not just on individuals. It's on our collective societies to put value on this and create space for us.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful answer. I hope everybody also got inspired like me and when they listen to this talk. Thank you so much, Cathy, and I hope to meet you in person, maybe on a hill or in a garden. I don't know.
I'd love to. I've traveled to Turkey to give speeches and done just a tiny bit of tourism, but not nearly enough. I know you have some wonderful rock climbing, particularly down in the south near Antalya. And friends of mine have been ski mountaineering in the Turkish mountains. They brought back the most beautiful photographs. So yes, there is so much to do. I'd love to visit Turkey, kind of, not an extended mountain trip one day.
Yeah. Hope to meet you then in one of them all together.
Sounds right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.